In a quiet courtroom, tension filled the air. The judge's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "You will not disrespect this courtroom with your unprofessional clothes." The woman standing before him, a nurse, still in her blue scrubs, looked stunned. But what she said next would leave the entire room on its feet, and even the judge lost for words. This is the story of Emily Carter, a trauma nurse who walked into a courtroom and left a message far more powerful than anyone expected. This wasn't a courtroom drama scripted by Hollywood. It was real, raw, and more powerful than anyone in that room was ready for. By the time the dust settled, the judge who raised his voice couldn't even find his words, and the entire courtroom was on its feet, clapping. For her. Why? What did she say that was so powerful, so unexpected, so true, that it made the entire room break the wreaths of silence and decorum? Stay with me, because this story is about far more than a dress code. Stay with me, because this story is about far more than a dress code. It's about real respect. It's about courage, conviction, and one moment where everything changed, not just for her, but for everyone watching. And believe me, you're going to want to hear what she said, because once you do, you'll never look at a nurse or a courtroom the same way again. It started like this. The wooden doors creaked open as she walked in, nervously, quietly, but with purpose. Her name? Emily Carter. Her outfit? Bright blue scrubs, slightly wrinkled, sleeves rolled up just a bit at the wrist, and most noticeably, a fresh blood stain across her forearm. Now don't flinch. It wasn't her blood. That stain carried a story and a weight that would soon shake the entire courtroom. But before that happened, it caught the judge's attention. "Miss Carter, are you aware this is a courtroom, not an emergency room?" Boom. The voice of Judge Harold Bennett sliced through the courtroom like a blade through paper, sharp, authoritative, and angry. The air stiffened. The gallery turned to look. Some chuckled. Others gasped. Emily froze for a split second. She was just a witness, not a defendant, not a lawyer. She didn't come to argue the law. She came to tell the truth. But now, all eyes were on her scrubs, not her story. Let's pause for a second. You ever been scolded in public when you were just doing your job? That gut-wrenching mix of embarrassment and rage? That's where Emily was standing. Only she wasn't in a meeting room or a break room. She was in a courtroom, with people whispering, the judge glaring, and a smug defense lawyer smirking in the corner like he just won a round he hadn't earned. And the irony? Emily didn't even want to be there. She'd just come off a 12-hour trauma shift at the hospital. Her phone rang while she was grabbing a vending machine coffee. It was the DA's office. They needed her testimony right now. No time to change. No time to wipe the blood off her sleeve. So she came. She showed up, because that's what you do when someone's life is on the line. And now, here she was, being told she was disrespecting the court. "You will not disrespect this courtroom with your unprofessional clothes," Judge Bennett continued, his voice echoing off the varnished walls. And that's when it happened. Emily Carter's hand shook, just slightly. Her eyes flicked toward the gallery, where Miguel's mother sat with silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Miguel, the kid she had stabilized just hours ago. The one who'd been hit by a drunk driver doing 60 through a red light. The one who was still unconscious in the ICU, his tiny frame hooked up to machines. Yeah, that's why she was here. That's why she didn't change. But the judge didn't know that yet. He was too busy inspecting the fabric on her arms instead of the reason she was in. Meanwhile, the courtroom audience didn't quite know what to make of it. She really came in scrubs? She couldn't at least change? What kind of nurse doesn't respect the courtroom? But then again, what kind of courtroom doesn't respect a nurse? That was the question about to turn everything upside down. Your clothes are not acceptable. This is a place where we show respect, the judge snapped. Emily looked down at her blood-stained sleeve, then back up at the judge. The prosecutor cleared his throat, awkwardly. "Your Honor, Miss Carter is an essential witness. She should have dressed like one." The judge cut him off. The tension was electric, the silence louder than any gavel slam. And then Emily Carter stood up straighter. Her next words would flip the entire courtroom on its head. Emily had spent the last 12 years inside trauma bays and ICU halls. Think about that. That's over a decade of nights, weekends, missed holidays, and chaotic emergencies that left no time for second thoughts. She held the hands of strangers bleeding out on stretchers, whispered comfort to patients gasping for breath. She'd made choices in seconds that meant the difference between life and death. Now, ask yourself, what do those kinds of people wear? Because when you're deep in the middle of an emergency, You don't put on a blazer. You don't button up a blouse. You put on your armor, your scrubs. You roll up your sleeves and save lives. And on that particular day, she did just that. Miguel, a 10-year-old boy who just started 5th grade, funny, a little shy, loved Spider-Man. Emily met him on a gurney, unconscious, broken bones, internal bleeding. The paramedics had done what they could. The driver who hit him, drunk, reeking of whiskey, high-powered lawyer on speed dial. They brought Miguel in at 7:14 a.m. By 7:18, Emily had a team working around the clock. Heart monitor, fluids, chest tube, laceration repair. At 8:05 a.m., she handed off her shift and walked straight into a courtroom with dried blood on her sleeves and truth burning in her chest. So when the judge decided to scold her for being unprofessional, it wasn't just embarrassing. It was infuriating. And here's the kicker. As Emily stood in silence, being berated for wearing scrubs, she glanced over, and there he was, the defendant, the man who ran the red light, looking smug, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes filled with arrogance. He was dressed to the nines, tailored suit, designer watch. That too expensive to be guilty look plastered all over him. And Emily? She was the one being told she didn't respect the court. The irony would be hilarious if it weren't so disgusting. Then it happened. The judge sighed, clearly done with the debate. We'll take a break so you can go change. But Emily didn't move. Instead, she stood a little taller. And with a calm, unwavering voice that silenced every whisper in the room, she said, "With all due respect, Your Honor, no." Boom. You could hear a pin drop. Even the bailiff raised an eyebrow. And then she did something no one expected. She raised her arm, showing the red smear on her sleeve. This is Miguel's blood," she said. One sentence, one truth, and the walls of that courtroom shifted. Emily didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't have to. Her voice was firm, steady. The kind of voice that had delivered bad news to parents. The kind of voice that had stayed strong when patients were slipping away. She pointed to the defendant. "He did this," she said. "I came straight from the ICU because he ran a red light. Miguel's still fighting for his life. I didn't stop to change because every minute mattered." Chew, you ever hear something that makes you sit up straighter? That's what happened. The courtroom had gone from laughter to absolute silence. The prosecutor bled. The defense attorney shuffled his notes. Miguel's mother was crying openly, and Emily kept going. "You want to talk about respect?" she asked. "Respect is showing up. Respect is telling the truth, even when it's inconvenient. Respect is not about your clothes, it's about your actions." And then she did what no courtroom dress code could stop. She pointed at her scrubs and said, This is what real honor looks like." Right there, that line. That was the line that would break the courtroom silence. That would become a quote shared on social media, printed on posters, whispered in hospital lounges. For a moment, nothing moved. The judge sat frozen, his gavel still raised, like he was about to speak but forgot how. Then, quietly, Miguel's mother stood. She clapped once, then again, her hands shaking through the tears. Then the jury stood, and the gallery, and even the bailiff gave a small nod. The courtroom, bound by silence, order, and tradition, erupted in applause. Not because someone won, because someone stood. Judge Bennett lowered his gavel. His face had changed. Gone was the frustration, the stern authority. In its place, thoughtfulness, a flicker of humility. He nodded slowly. "Proceed, Miss Carter. No further scolding, no break, no argument." Because in that moment, even he knew he'd just learned something. Emily gave her testimony clearly, without nerves, without theatrics. She explained what she saw that morning. How the car blew through the red light. How Miguel had barely taken 2 steps into the crosswalk before he was thrown onto the pavement. She didn't embellish, didn't dramatize. She told the truth like she always did. Clean, precise, unflinching. And the smug look on the defendant's face, gone. By the time Emily stepped down, the room was different. It wasn't about scrubs anymore. It wasn't even about a courtroom. It was about truth and the people brave enough to speak it. As Emily walked past the bailiff, yes, the same one who tried to stop her at the door, he gave her a subtle, respectful nod. He didn't say a word, but his eyes did. They said, "Thank you." So what happens after a moment like that? When an entire courtroom stands to applaud, not a lawyer, not a verdict, but a nurse. The short answer, everything changes. But not always in ways you expect. It started small. Someone in the gallery had filmed it. Not the whole thing, Just enough. Just enough to catch the tail end of Emily's powerful speech and the wave of applause that followed. Within hours, that clip hit social media, and it spread like wildfire. Comments poured in. This woman is a national treasure. Why are we shaming people who save lives? That judge owes her an apology and a thank you. And of course, if I'm ever in a courtroom, I want her on my side. People weren't just supporting Emily, they were relating to her. Because this wasn't just about scrubs anymore. The truth is, Emily's story hit a nerve because it exposed something bigger. How often society confuses appearance with value. Think about it. How many teachers have been judged by the cars they drive, not the minds they shape? How many paramedics, delivery drivers, janitors, social workers, all written off because they didn't show up in a suit? It's a quiet insult we've all seen. Dress better, be respected more. Look the part, or don't expect to be hurt. Presentation over purpose. Emily's moment, it ripped that illusion apart. Emily returned to her hospital shift the same night. No red carpet, no fanfare, just fluorescent lights and steady beeping monitors. But something had changed. A few nurses clapped as she passed. A janitor gave her a thumbs up. A patient whispered, "You were on my phone." She laughed, because despite all the chaos, the praise, the posts, Emily was still Emily, and the blood on her sleeves, it wasn't fame. It was Miguel's fight. What happened to Miguel? This is the part that gets emotional, because stories like this, they don't always end with a perfect bow. Miguel fought hard. There were complications, surgeries, scary moments when things went quiet. But after 9 days in the ICU, surrounded by blinking machines and prayers whispered into hospital linens, Miguel opened his eyes. He made it. The first thing he asked for? A Spider-Man toy. The second? He wanted to know if the cool nurse would visit again. Emily did. She brought a stuffed Spider-Man and a promise that no matter what happens in courtrooms, offices, or any other stage, they'll always show up for kids like him. What happened to the driver? He was convicted. Reckless endangerment, DUI, driving with a suspended license. The evidence was overwhelming. Emily's testimony sealed it. He'll serve time, but more than that, his conviction sent a message. You can pay for a fancy lawyer, but you can't outdress the truth. Now this part? This shocked everyone. 3 days after the trial, Judge Harold Bennett issued a public statement. I want to extend a personal apology to Nurse Emily Carter. In my haste to preserve courtroom decorum, I failed to recognize the deeper respect she deserved. Her words, her poise, and her commitment reminded me and everyone watching that justice is not about appearances, it's about truth. And she spoke it flawlessly. He didn't stop there. Judge Bennett donated $10,000 to the hospital's pediatric trauma fund in Miguel's name. Immediate reaction, talk shows picked it up. News anchors debated it. Headlines ran wild. Nurse schools judge in viral courtroom moment. Scrubs versus suits, the culture clash we needed. Blood on her sleeves, truth in her voice. Emily got interview requests, book deals, invitations to speak. She turned most of them down. Not because she wasn't honored, but because she didn't want to become a brand. She wanted to stay a nurse. But why did this hit so hard? Because at some level, we've all been Emily. Showing up when we're exhausted. Being judged by how we look, not what we've done. Having our truth minimized because it wasn't dressed appropriately. This story pulled all those threads and tied them into one moment. A moment where someone said no to shame and yes to something better. A final note from Emily that broke the internet again. When asked what she wanted people to take away from the moment, Emily didn't say much. But what she said, wow, respect isn't something you wear. It's something you earn when you keep showing up, even when no one's clapping. And that's the real mic drop. So now, let me ask you something. What's your scrubs moment? When have you stood in front of people who didn't see you because they couldn't see past your surface? And what would happen if you spoke up? If you told your story without flinching? Because maybe, just maybe, there's an entire room waiting to stand up and clap. They just haven't heard your truth yet. If this story hit home, not just entertained you, but made you think, feel, or remember your worth, here's what you do. Don't hit subscribe, hit reply, hit record, hit your moment. Speak the truth you've been sitting on. Tell the story that makes people pause. Wear your scrubs. Your flaws, your stains, whatever they are, with pride. Because sometimes the most powerful thing in the room isn't the judge. It's the person who didn't ask for a stage but earned one anyway.